Bush Center for Intelligence. In this 40-minute ceremony, we'll hear from the former president, CIA Director George Tenet, and Ohio Congressman Rob Portman.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 41st President of the United States, the Honorable George Bush and Mrs. Barbara Bush, accompanied by Director of Central Intelligence George Tenet and Mrs. Tenet, Deputy Director General John Gordon and Mrs. Gordon, the Honorable Rob Portman, Representative from Ohio, and Mrs. Portman. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Joint Armed Services Color Guard, and please remain standing for the national anthem played by the President's own United States Marine Band Brass Quintet. Please be seated. Good morning. On behalf of Director Tenet, Deputy Director Gordon, and the men and women of CIA, it's my distinct honor to welcome President and Mrs. Bush, members of the Bush family, and our other distinguished guests to the dedication of the George Bush Center for Intelligence. It's particularly fitting to honor President Bush by naming CIA's headquarters compound after him. Not only is he the only director to become president, so far, but he's a great friend of the agency. Those of us who were at CIA when he was DCI remember his obvious appreciation for our work, willingness to stand up for us, and calmness under pressure. As Vice President and President, Mr. Bush was an avid, even voracious consumer of intelligence. He kept us on our toes, challenged us to do better, to take calculated risks, and to tell it like it is. Because even if the news wasn't what he wanted to hear, he knew he needed to hear it. Our first speaker today, Congressman Rob Portman, is in a very direct way the man responsible for us being here today. He knows George Bush well. During the 1980s, Mr. Portman worked as a volunteer and advance man for then Vice President Bush. From 1989 until 1991, he served in the White House as Associate Counsel to the President and as Director of the White House Office of Legislative Affairs. Now in his 6th year representing the 2nd Congressional District of Ohio in the Cincinnati area, Congressman Rob Portman has built a strong record as a legislator. He is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over such areas as federal tax laws, Social Security, Medicare, and international trade. In fact, when he was first appointed to the committee in 1993, Congressman Portman was the most junior member to be named to Ways and Means since 1967, when congressional freshman George Bush was appointed. Congressman Portman is perhaps best known for his leadership in reforming the Internal Revenue Service. He and Senator Bob Carey served as co-chairman of the year-long National Commission on Restructuring the IRS, which led to comprehensive reforms that became law last summer. Among the legislative successes of which Congressman Portman is most proud is his bill to name the CIA headquarters compound as the George Bush Center for Intelligence. During the House floor debate before passage of this legislation, Congressman Portman put it well when he said, "Honesty, integrity, responsibility, and patriotism is the Bush legacy and the example he set for all of us. The Bush Center designation provides the appropriate national recognition for the service of this American hero." Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the sponsor of the legislation to designate the George Bush Center for Intelligence, Congressman Rob Portman.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave, very much for that kind introduction. I was very honored to be able to participate in this wonderful tribute to our 41st president today, and I know how the men and women of the Central Intelligence Agency, many of whom are with us here today, feel about it. Just this past weekend in my hometown newspaper, in fact, a CIA official was quoted as saying and speculating as to what kind of response President Bush would receive today, "It will be like Elvis has returned." The king is here. Based on that reception, I think it's even bigger than Elvis. I think the only thing that would have been better, Mr. President, if you had parachuted in. I think that. But, that's going to happen in June, I understand. All of us who have had the good fortune to work for George Bush over the years, and many of them are here today, know the feelings that so many of the employees of the CIA have for him, the sense of loyalty that comes from working for George Bush and working with him. It was a great personal privilege for me to introduce the legislation Dave talked about a moment ago to name this beautiful compound in honor of George Bush. And it didn't just pass both houses of Congress, as Dave said. It was, at the end, embraced by Congress. In fact, I would say, in fairness, it was one of the very few things that was enacted in the last session of Congress that truly brought people together, just as George Bush has done his entire life. Even so, as no one knows better than former Congressman George Bush and former Senate Intelligence Committee staff director George Tenet, nothing happens automatically in the United States Congress. Even good ideas have to navigate through that legislative maze. And luckily in this case, we had a very strong team at the helm, many of whom are here today. It included Intelligence Chairman on the House side, Porter Goss, Ike Skelton and Lee Hamilton, Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Shelby, who actually worked this through his authorization bill in a conference between the House and the Senate. See Senator Shelby here in the front row this morning. Congressman Norm Dix and Bob Carey, the ranking members of the Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Moran and Frank Wolf, who represent this area, and so many other members, so many of whom are here with us today. I'd like to ask that every member of Congress who is here, all of whom assisted in this effort, and all of whom strongly support the mission of this agency, if you all would please stand for proper recognition. In addition to this bipartisan team on the Hill, there are also many others who made this possible. Again, a lot are here today. I think of Sonny Montgomery, Gene Becker, Joe Hagan, Mac McClarty. I see John Podesta here, Seth Webb, Nick Callio, so many others. I wish we had time to go through the list and talk about each and every one of you, because each of you were important to getting to this point. I do want to single out one person, and that is CIA Director George Tenet, who gave this his early personal support and played a vital role in making this a reality. He was in on it at the beginning, Mr. President, even before you were aware of this. That's how they do it here at the agency. But George, thank you for all your support. Over the past year, a number of reporters have asked me about the naming of this complex. They have asked why it's appropriate. Why should this be the first D.C. area tribute to George Bush? Well, I think the answer is probably pretty evident in the warmth and enthusiasm of this crowd today. The Bush Center for Intelligence is a particularly fitting tribute because of the very special bond between George Bush and the CIA and its people. He was also, as Dave said, the first director to go on to become president. And he's not the first president who's going to come back and become director, Mr. Tenet. You'll be glad to know. I thought there might have been an announcement earlier, Dave, when you mentioned that, but he's too busy. But he also was the first political figure to head the Central Intelligence Agency, and as many of you may not know, he was also the first agency head to take the employee elevator to his office every morning rather than the director's private elevator. Vintage. Vintage George Bush. And I think one small example of why during his tenure the then beleaguered men and women of the agency felt they had a friend and a supporter at the very top and began to hold their heads a little higher. I think the extraordinary leadership Director George Bush demonstrated during a difficult time in the agency's history is pretty well documented. And many of you know his high regard for the intelligence gathering capability of the CIA and its importance in conducting foreign policy. This high regard has been demonstrated by an unprecedented regular intelligence briefing he insisted on, first as Vice President, then as President, and now as a former President who continues to be sought after by our leadership on matters of foreign affairs. What is perhaps less well known is the personal importance which George Bush attaches to his service here at the agency. As many of the Bush friends, family, and fellow staff members know well, George Bush has reserved a warm place in his heart for this agency and its people. There are also broader reasons why this tribute is so well deserved. Throughout his remarkable career, George Bush exemplified the highest values and principles of public service. I'm proud to count myself among those many young people who learned from his example that honor, decency, and integrity are not only consistent with public service, but essential to it. In his wonderful new book, The Greatest Generation, Tom Brokaw summed up the Bush legacy. He wrote, as a former congressman, ambassador to the United Nations, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, vice president, and then president of the United States, George Bush represents an unequaled record of public service within his generation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's for all these reasons that the naming of this impressive compound in honor of George Bush is so appropriate. Congratulations, Mr. President. President and Mrs. Bush, knowing that you won't be able to come back and visit the compound as often as you might like, we have as a remembrance for you a signed and framed copy of the legislation establishing the George Bush Center for Intelligence. Mr. President, if you'd like to come forward, I'd like to present it to you.
Thank you, Congressman Portman. Our next speaker prefers short introductions. Before obliging him, however, I've been asked to debunk a rumor. There is no truth to the story that he pressured us to shorten the sign to read simply George's Center for Intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, the 18th Director of Central Intelligence, George J. Tenet.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. This is a great day at the Central Intelligence Agency and a great day for our CIA family. I know that I speak for every man and woman in this place today when I say, welcome home, George and Barbara Bush. It's great to have you back. Mrs. Bush, in your autobiography, you tell a wonderful story about your husband. A reporter once asked him what he considered to be his greatest accomplishment. In the seconds before the president answered, you tried to guess what he might say. Would it be bringing the Cold War to a peaceful end, or leading the coalition in the Gulf War? But the president replied, our kids still come home. Mr. President, we hope that you and Mrs. Bush will always come home to visit us at CIA. We considered it an honor to have our complex named after you, and we will do all that we can to make you and our wonderful country proud of us. We are deeply proud that you are part of our CIA family. As you know, the sense of family here is very, very strong. We care about each other. We take care of each other. We are part of a community that pulls together in times of crisis and sorrow and celebrates together in times of joy, as we are doing here today. And 50 years from now, Mr. President, when a future generation of intelligence officers is serving our nation here at the George Bush Center for Intelligence, they too will be inspired, as we have been, by the values of duty, honor, country, to which you have devoted your entire life. I would now like to read to you a very special letter of congratulations. It says, Dear George, it really is a terrific name. You ought to think about this. Terrific name. I want to join the men and women of the intelligence community and all Americans in saluting you as our nation designates the Central Intelligence Agency complex as the George Bush Center for Intelligence. When you assumed your duties as Director of Central Intelligence in January of 1976, the nation had just endured one of the most tumultuous periods in history. Many Americans had lost faith in government. Many asked whether the CIA should continue to exist. As Director, you accomplished a great deal. You restored morale and discipline to the agency while publicly emphasizing the value of intelligence to the nation's security. You also restored America's trust in the CIA and the rest of the intelligence community. Of course, we honor you today for more than your tenure as director. In your lifetime of service to America, you served not only as the head of the intelligence community, but also as president, as the nation's chief intelligence consumer. As president, you stood for American leadership around the world, leadership for freedom and democracy, peace and prosperity. As you know, in my time as president, I have turned to you more than once for your wise counsel, and I have benefited greatly from it. And I have been well served by the talented and dedicated men and women who make up the intelligence community that you did so much to preserve and to strengthen. On behalf of all Americans, I want to thank you for your patriotism and leadership, and I want to convey to you my warmest congratulations on receiving this fitting tribute. Sincerely, Bill Clinton, President of the United States. Mr. President, President Clinton and Congressman Portman have just eloquently described why our headquarters compound will forever bear your name and why all of us at CIA think so highly of you. There are men and women in this audience today who had the honor and privilege of serving under your leadership as Director of Central Intelligence. Many more here had the honor and privilege of serving in this agency and in the intelligence community under your presidency. The rest of us just consider it an honor and a privilege to pay tribute to you as one of this nation's most distinguished public servants. War hero, member of Congress, UN ambassador, chief envoy to China, Director of Central Intelligence, Vice President, and then President of the United States. When we first learned about Mr. Portman's initiative, the gesture seemed so fitting to us, and not just because you were the only DCI to become president, but for so many other reasons as well. Every component of this agency feels indebted to you in a very special way. Our Directorate of Administration remembers to this day the exceptional attention that you and Mrs. Bush devoted to the needs and concerns of the men and women of this agency and to their families. Never has a DCI written so many thank you notes to his employees, never. Your belief in the fundamental importance of our work never faltered. Your strong leadership restored our confidence. More importantly, it restored the American public's confidence in us. To the wizards in our Directorate of Science and Technology, you have been a champion of scientific intelligence, a leader who deeply appreciated the crucial role that technology plays in protecting our national security. You won the hearts of our Masters of Disguise on your 52nd birthday. They gave you one of their famous makeovers. Not long after, a stranger quietly took a chair at a very important intelligence meeting. Nobody had a clue until your familiar voice emanated from this guy with red hair, a big nose, and thick glasses, and he said, "I'm sweating under this thing." The unbiased assessment of our Directorate of Intelligence is that throughout your long years of public service, you have been among their most dedicated, enthusiastic, and discriminating customers. You have always understood how vitally important it is for our national leaders to be able to make their decisions based on the most complete information and the best analysis possible. As DCI, as Vice President, and as President, you read every single daily brief that the Intelligence Directorate produced. Even if they doubted that anybody else in the government was reading their stuff, they could always count on you. As you know, our analysts pride themselves on the accuracy of their predictions. They will always be among your biggest fans, even when you didn't just get it exactly right, Mr. President. And we found an instance where you didn't get it exactly right. After President Ford asked you to take the CIA job and you answered the call to duty, you wrote the following to your good friend, Congressman Bill Steiger, and I quote, "I honestly feel my political future is behind me." But hell, I'm 51, and this new one gives me a chance to really contribute. Mr. President, you blew it. You blew it big time. Last but not least, you have the undying respect of the fearless officers in our Directorate of Operations. You are a staunch defender of the need for human intelligence, for espionage, at a very tough time when it really counted. But that's not the only reason why you rate with the Directorate of Operations. You are the only former DCI, and you will always be the only former DCI and president to jump out of a plane. Not once, but twice. As a young naval aviator, you refused to leave your burning plane until the very last second. Then as a retired civilian, you dove out of a perfectly good plane just for the heck of it. You are definitely their kind of guy, Mr. President. All of us from CIA, whatever the directorate, agree that there has been no stronger an advocate and supporter of our work than you. We couldn't have asked for a more interested and engaged intelligence consumer, a more constructive advisor, a more knowledgeable leader of our national security community, or a more faithful friend of the men and women of this agency than you, Mr. President. And we are very, very grateful to you for that devotion over these many, many years. I don't have to tell you that each and every day, the dedicated men and women of the CIA provide the President of the United States and other decision makers the critical intelligence they need to protect American lives and advance American interests around the globe. Thanks in great measure to your leadership, our country no longer confronts the worldwide threat from a rival superpower that we did during the Cold War. But as the 21st century approaches, we must contend with a host of other dangerous challenges of unprecedented complexity and scope. The United States remains the indispensable country in this uncertain and chaotic world, and time and again, the CIA has proven itself to be the indispensable intelligence organization helping America build a more secure world for our people everywhere. To the patriotic men and women who work here at CIA, this is not just a job. It is a commitment to serve our wonderful country. That kind of a commitment lasts a lifetime. It continues long after we all leave here. All of us feel that way. That's another reason we think the world of you, Mr. President, because we know that you feel that way too. In January of 1977, as you and Mrs. Bush prepared to move your family back to Texas and figure out what to do next, you delivered a farewell address to agency employees. You thanked them for their unselfish dedication to our country, a dedication I can assure you is undiminished today. You concluded your gracious goodbye with these words, and I quote, "I take with me many happy memories. Even the tough, unresolved problems don't seem so awesome, for they are overshadowed by our successes and by the fact that we do provide the best foreign intelligence in the world. I am leaving, but I am not forgetting. I hope I can find some way in the years ahead to make the American people understand more fully the greatness that is CIA." Mr. President, over the decades and to this very day, you have found many, many ways to help us fulfill our vital intelligence mission in behalf of the American people. You did not forget us, and we will never forget you. May God bless you, Mrs. Bush, and your wonderful family, and thank you by honoring us here today, sir.
Mr. President.
Can you grab me one? Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Director, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys. That's enough. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. Director, thank you for those overly kind remarks. And I would have used the other elevator, but I was here such a short time, I didn't know it was there. They hid it from me. Let me thank the great team that we have running CIA. I think all the former directors here, and there are several, people that led this marvelous agency would agree that in George Tenet we have one of the very, very best. And I'm so pleased to be introduced by you and so pleased with your role here. And may I thank General Gordon, with whom I worked closely when I was President of the United States, the deputy here, who is doing a superb job too. I want to thank the Marines for showing up, and of course want to thank Rob Portman, and I promise not to sing "I Am Nothing But a Hound Dog." I told Barbara that all of this hoopla was a little overwhelming, and she knew exactly the right thing to say. She always does, my loving wife, after 54 years, 6 months, whatever it is. Who's counting? George, just remember, she says this, just remember, George, the only things they name after you, they only name things after you when you're dead or really old. So, but then again, Barbara, we keep hoping, but she hasn't changed. You mentioned the parachute jump, Director. I landed very proud. Jumped out of the plane at 12,500 feet, fell at 120 miles an hour for 7,500 feet, pulled the ripcord, floated down into the tranquil sands of Yuma, Arizona, and said, "Now what do you think?" She said, "I haven't seen a free fall like that since the '92 election." So anyway, she is thrilled to be here. And of course, I want to thank Senator Shelby and Senator Carey and Representative Goss and Norm Dix, who I don't think is here, and every other member of Congress who had a hand in making this wonderful event in my life happen. I would be remiss not to single out Rob Portman, who served on my team when I was privileged to be president. And if I'd have known he was going to do this, I think we could have given him a nicer office there at the White House. But it was, thank you, Rob, very much, and all of you who had a hand in this wonderful, wonderful event in my life. I want to thank, as a matter of fact, members on both sides of the aisle. You know, I had some disagreements with Congress, what president doesn't, and during my 4 years. And after a few dust-ups, I didn't know how such a vote in the Congress might go on this high honor. Part of me expected it to be, and this is a true anecdote, like the vote when Midland, Texas, when the school board decided to name a local school after me. And that was just a few years ago. I just left the White House, and the vote there was 3-2. And it's true. The two guys that voted no had a lot of excuses, but anyway, that was it. But this was much nicer, and you guys touched my heart. So to George Tenet, our great director, and everyone at CIA, all I can say is that the gratitude in my heart literally knows no bounds. I left here some 22 years ago after a limited tenure, but my stay here had a major impact on me. CIA became part of my heartbeat back then, and it's never gone away. In my opinion, of the many agencies comprising the executive branch, the men and women of CIA, many of whom I'm privileged to say are here, exemplify the best about public service. Here, service to country comes first, ever vigilant, always looking out for the nation's best interests, but rarely getting the credit that they deserve, rarely getting the credit you deserve. Never sit at the head table, never get singled out, but are there out of love of country. This is the full measure of devotion that you bring to your work, and that Barbara and I tried to, in a way, bring to ours. And I got some things right, and I'm sure I could have done many things better. But I hope it will be said of my time here and in the White House that I kept the trust and treated my office with respect. I know you do that every single day, and I know I tried. I also know that I walked in here 24 years ago untutored in the arts of intelligence. I see my first deputy, Dick Walter, sitting there. He will certainly attest to that. And he helped me. And you had every reason to be suspicious of this untutored outsider who had, though I came out of a non-political post in China, had spent a lot of my time in partisan politics. And I understood the anxiety and concerns on Capitol Hill about that. But this agency gave me their trust from day one. And your mission is different now than it was back then. The Soviet Union is no more. And some people think, well, what do we need intelligence for? And my answer to that is we got plenty of enemies abound, unpredictable leaders willing to export instability or to commit crimes against humanity, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, narco-trafficking, people killing each other, fundamentalists killing each other in the name of God. These and more, many more, as our analysts know, as our collectors of intelligence know, are our enemies. And to combat them, we need more intelligence, not less. And we need more human intelligence. And that means we need more protection for the methods we use to gather intelligence and more protection for our sources, particularly our human sources, people that are risking their lives for their country. I have nothing, even though I'm a tranquil guy now at this stage of my life, I have nothing but contempt and anger for those who betray the trust by exposing the name of our sources. They are, in my view, the most insidious of traitors. And when it comes to the mission of CIA and the community heads, George Tenet has it exactly right. Give the President and the policymakers the best possible intelligence product and stay out of the policy making or policy implementing except as specifically decreed in the law. And because of your support, the same support given to a fledgling DCI 24 years ago, George Tenet is able to do that, just that, able to provide the President the best intelligence possible in the entire world. For Douglas MacArthur, duty, honor, country represented a great moral code of conduct and chivalry of those who guard this beloved land. And that's true here at CIA. It's true all across the intelligence community, the huge community that comes together under the leadership of the director. And this complex might well have been named for more deserving men who preceded me as DCI. You think of Bill Donovan or Alan Douglas or Dick Helms here with us today, giants in their field. Or it might have been named for people like Welch or Buckley. And like all of them, and so many more, I am proud to have served with the men and women of CIA. You know, it's been said that patriotism is not a frenzied burst of emotion, but rather the quiet and steady dedication of a lifetime. And to me, this best sums up CIA: duty, honor, country. This timeless creed of service motivates those who serve at Langley and in intelligence all across the world. It is an honor to stand here and be counted among you. Thank you very, very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in this area until after the official party has departed. Official guests with the blue border special event badges are invited to attend a reception for President and Mrs. Bush in the building lobby. Agency employees will have an opportunity to greet President Bush during his walk through the building. Please consult your schedules for the time and places. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Thank you.
Terrific.
Coming up, a news conference on how the electric utilities industry is preparing for the year 2000. And at 8 p.m., today's briefings on the military operations.